I'm going to do my best to shout, although I don't have a very loud voice, so hopefully the live stream will pick up stuff and the helicopter will stay away. This is kind of an amalgamation of two speeches because I keep getting scuppered, so just bear with me if it jumps about a bit. I'm trying to cover human impacts of animal agriculture as well as the environmental impacts. So, for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Dr. Alice Brough and I'm a veterinary surgeon, an ex-livestock vet in fact, who spent several years in the British pig industry. It's very hard to communicate the scale of what we're facing, but I'm going to try and speak into my own experiences and where I feel like I'm qualified to speak from the last 5, 10, 15 years of direct involvement in practices which are not only drawing us closer to the climate emergency, but are creating human pandemics, global health crises, and bringing us ever closer to a man-made disaster which has been forecast to kill 10 million people by 2050. And I'm talking about antibiotic resistance. So having worked on hundreds of farms and in slaughterhouses across the UK, I thought I'd introduce a few points via a day in the life of a pig vet. So picture this. I pick up an emergency call. Alice, we've had 30 pigs die overnight. Can you come out? All right. My brain's already turning over the kind of most likely culprits for the unexplained deaths, and I load up my car with various boxes of pharmaceuticals. Arriving on farm, I'll take a look round and assess the situation, and I might think to take some samples from live pigs before I look at the dead animals. So leaning down, nose to snout, with a screaming pig on the end of a snare, I might take blood from the jugular vein. I might swab the nasal passages or the tonsils, much like a COVID test. And the pig's probably breathing, coughing, sneezing into my own eyes, nose and mouth. And at this point, I don't know what's killed those 30 pigs, right? On to the dead ones. So post-mortem exams are diagnostically excellent and probably something that I performed most days during my 4 years in the pig industry. If I'm lucky, the farmer has left the dead animals out for me. If I'm not, they're in the dead bin already. The dead bin. A great vat of liquefied, maggot-infested carcasses. So I flop them out onto the floor and I take a blade and I open each one up, examining the cavities, organs, taking off the heads, generally digging around for clues. Gut content explosions, spattering of bodily fluids, holes in the glove, nicks to my hand with a blade that's already passed through 10 dead animals are all common. I think you get the picture. I don't know at this point what has killed those 30 animals. I don't know whether the random mutations constantly ongoing in viruses and bacteria have mutated in such a way that this can pass to me. This can kill me. Every day is a roulette. 3 and 4, 75% of new and emerging diseases in humans come from animals. They're zoonotic. And there are viruses in livestock that can wipe out an entire herd. 100% mortality. One such virus in China has wiped out 50% of their industry over the last couple of years. And that equates to the entire world's population of pigs put together in 2 years. Imagine if that jumped hosts. There are viruses that make mothers abort or give birth to deformed babies. There are viruses in poultry, our most consumed animal globally and in the UK, that have a 30 to 60% mortality. Influenza viruses, so common and so diverse, that mutate so quickly that we have to update human vaccines every year. The worst pandemic known to man was an influenza virus thought to have originated on a US poultry farm, the Spanish flu, and it killed 50 million people. We have got off, and I cannot stress enough, incredibly lightly with COVID-19. It It has an approximate mortality rate of 0.5%. I wouldn't even bother checking for that in a pig herd. I probably wouldn't even notice it in amongst the standard respiratory disease. And to give you a bit of context, standard mortality, average mortality rate pre-weaning in pigs in this country is 12%. Post-weaning to slaughter at 6 months is a further 4%. Scale that up to a global human population, that is 1.2 billion deaths annually before adulthood. So, to combat this normal death rate in pigs, most days I was putting mass treatments of antibiotics through water systems and signing off medicated feed scripts. Because the only things that would suffer if I was not to do that would be the pigs. They require these antibiotics to survive a hideous system of our making. Animal farms are perfect breeding grounds for disease, perfect for cultivating pandemics and antibiotic resistance. Excuse me. This is not a Chinese problem. This is not something from which Britain is exempt. To help you envisage where the problem might lie, in this country, legal and in fact red tractor standard space requirements for a pig of 110 kilos, which is standard slaughter weight, and for reference I'm about 50, so 110 kilos gets 65 centimetres squared, which is what, about that, total space to eat, drink, sleep, socialise, urinate and defecate. This is why we're in an antibiotic crisis. What you see plastered all over the news in farm exposés represents the majority rather than the minority, and anyone who hasn't looked online at any of them, just check out Viva, Animal Equality, and you'll see where the problem lies. And it's getting worse rather than better. JBS, a Brazilian meat giant, now owns around 30% of the UK pig and poultry market. A Brazilian meat giant. What do you think those animals are being fed? This one single company produces half the carbon emissions of fossil fuel giants like Shell and BP, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But pigs and poultry, our most consumed animal, they don't eat grass. What they do eat is soya grown in the ashes of a destroyed Amazon rainforest. They eat grains, pulses, beans, perfectly balanced vitamins and minerals, fish meal. Fish meal. Around 20 million tonnes annually of fish are ground up and fed to livestock and farmed fish. The animals that we use have been manipulated to such an extent that they are now Frankenstein monsters. Pigs grow at over a kilo a day in their peak. Chickens reach slaughter before 6 weeks old, unable to walk. A lactating mother pig will eat up to 16 kilos of high quality feed a day. And a lactating dairy cow will drink over 150 litres of fresh water every single day. We drink about 2. Meanwhile, 800 million people are malnourished. 8,000 children starving to death every day. But somehow we can provide adequate nutrition, fresh water and comprehensive healthcare to the 76 billion land animals that we slaughter every year. It's an abomination. This is a human rights issue, as well as animal rights and an ecological issue. If we care about monocropping, pesticides, bees, soil structure, the general continuation of the human race, animal agriculture is where we need to start looking for answers. As I mentioned before, one meat company produces half the carbon emissions of Shell, where we were all protesting yesterday. And there are some strong parallels to be drawn to the fossil fuel industry. 40 years ago, scientists were trying to tell us that they were causing climate change. But when big companies are financially threatened, and just as an example that I'm aware of, the pig industry in the UK is worth £14 billion. When they're threatened, they turn their millions to covering it up, to producing confusing, contradictory information, funding dodgy studies and media articles. Think how many different headlines we've seen on red meat and cancer, for example. The UN tweeted back in July that, quote, "The meat industry is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the world's biggest oil companies. Meat production contributes to the depletion of water sources and drives deforestation." That received such a violent backlash that they took it down. The United Nations bullied over a tweet. That is how powerful the meat industry is. Just last week, I received my usual email updates from Pig Progress publication, and the headline was, "If there weren't enough challenges already, soon pig producers in Europe will also face the EU's Green Deal." That says it all, really, doesn't it? There is a reason that Greta Thunberg and her motto of "listen to the science" is vegan. There is a reason that David Attenborough just publicly called for everyone to adopt a more plant-based diet. Please, I urge you to think about what it is that's preventing us from removing these very real and completely unnecessary risks to human health and planetary health. Is it our own pleasure? Tradition? Is it just something we've always done or been told that we should do? Who is it that's instilling these values in us? Is it the industries trying to sell a product? Is it the government lobbied by those very industries? Is it the media? Can we trust any of them to tell the truth, rebels? No! And this is not blaming and shaming. This is me saying it's time to join the dots, to pick through the carefully constructed lies that we're fed and take back control. Even if you don't care about the unfortunate few species that we've enslaved for our own use, though I can tell you that it is heart-stoppingly awful to witness what we do to them. By the fact that we're all here, I know that we all care about wildlife, natural ecosystems, and I know that we all care about human life. Human and animal rights are inextricably linked, and it goes deep. During this pandemic, we've been offered a view into the lives of slaughterhouse workers, often marginalised members of society, people of colour, migrant workers, those who don't have any other option but to put on the diaper, literal nappies, and stand on a kill floor hour after hour, knowing that hundreds of their workmates have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Go to work or you'll lose your job, but also go to work and you might die. This is why we need a just transition to a plant-based food system. We simply cannot address the climate and ecological emergency without first taking this step to a transition. We cannot address injustice and oppression without taking a long, hard look at the great big fucking elephant in the room. I want to leave you with one question. Why take the risk? We rely on planetary health. We rely on the health of the animals inhabiting this planet. We are the animals. We listen to the science on fossil fuels and climate change. That's part of our ethos. I'll maybe wait for the bus. We listen to the science on fossil fuels and climate change. That is part of our ethos. And we know that they lied to us for years, decades of cover-up. We now know that animal agriculture are doing the exact same. Undeniably, the largest driver of climate change and the ecological emergency, undeniably barbaric for the animals and for humans. We're in this pandemic mess because of it, and we know we're going to see the end of medicine as we know it if we don't act now. So why take the risk when we have the power to bring it to its knees? And this is it. This is the message. We want to live. Woo.